Welcome to Ag Matters, covering positive agriculture stories from across Alaska on Big Cabbage Radio.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to Ag Matters. I'm your host, Ken Hoffman. I'm a farmer out in Palmer. My farm's name is Matsu Microgreens. We specialize in gourmet vegetables year-round. And I'm also the executive director of the Alaska Farm Bureau. So if you want to become a farmer, get interested in commercial agricultural production, you can always reach out to me, or you can visit our website at alaskafb.org. And if you are a farmer out there and you want to talk about your operation, reach out to me and we'll put you on Ag Matters. So today, a friend of mine is calling in. We've got Gabe with Far North Fungi. So Gabe, thanks for calling in.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ken. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you've been on the show before, but there's some listeners out there that maybe never listened to that episode. So if you could talk about yourself and your business partner and how you got in Alaska and in your farming business.
Yeah. So, I'm the co-owner of Far North Fungi. So we're a gourmet and medicinal mushroom farm located in Chugiak. And we've been growing mushrooms commercially since January of 2017. So yeah, quite a while now, kind of slowly scaling this thing up, which has been super exciting to kind of go from the backyard in Airport Heights where we started the farm to kind of in the Anchorage suburbs there. Yeah, and then kind of slowly we found out an old homestead out in Chugiak in 2021. So we bought that. So that's like 6.5 acres of commercially zoned land that we can kind of continue to build out the farm. But yeah, we kind of specialize in wood-loving mushrooms. So the mushroom industry is kind of broken into like two parts. There's the portobello, the cremini, and the button mushrooms that you find at a grocery store. And those are all from the European style of cultivation. So using horse, cow manure, straw, composting it down, and then growing the mushrooms on those. And those are all in the agaricus family. So they're all very closely related to one another. And the French were the ones who pioneered that in like the 1600s. Whereas the style of cultivation that we do was pioneered in Japan a few thousand years before that, using oak logs as kind of the food source for the mushrooms. And so the first mushroom that they grow or were able to grow that we also grow is the shiitake mushroom. So kind of a whole host of different mushrooms that grow on wood as their food source. So these are the kinds that go in and they kind of eat a dead tree once it's died. So that's really what our farm kind of primarily focuses on.
Cool. Okay, so 2017, you guys started the farm. Why did you choose mushrooms? Why not vegetables or cattle or any other business, but why mushrooms? Why did you guys get interested in that?
Yeah, so I had a little bit of experience in the ag world prior. I worked for Country Garden Farms, which they do primarily sod and then also some hay. So I had a little bit of experience with agriculture, but primarily I was a commercial fisherman. So kind of, food production, but not exactly farming, but definitely was kind of in the food production space to a degree. And I think what just attracted me to mushrooms in general was just that they were such a weird, unique organism that was kind of unlike growing plants, but then kind of unlike raising animals, but had kind of similarities with both things that I just found kind of like very interesting. And then also kind of looking at the economic opportunity, there was just kind of a lack of, especially you can occasionally find shiitake mushrooms up here, but a lot of the other varieties that we grow, like oyster mushroom and lion's mane, they were becoming more popular, but they really don't have like the shelf life for nationwide distribution. And the mushroom industry, like a lot of other food production in the United States, tends to be kind of consolidated in these just really large farms. So for instance, for mushroom growing, it's like 60% of U.S. mushroom production comes from one county in Pennsylvania. So they really focus on like the button mushrooms, the portobello, and they just grow a huge amount of it, and they distribute it all across the United States and export, and it's just a big industry there. But they kind of have to shy away from the more perishable varieties that don't have a month's shelf life to distribute. And so that was kind of where we felt like the economic opportunity was for a local production. And it also just seemed like it was well suited to Alaska's climate. Like mushroom growing was the first indoor agriculture. So the French, when they pioneered mushroom growing, they were growing in caves outside Paris. Mm-hmm. And that was mostly just to maintain the humidity. So I think a lot of people kind of think of mushrooms, oh, they grow in the dark and while that was true in France in the 1700s, they actually do like a little bit of light, and so we grow mostly in greenhouses. But we're in the process of expanding so that we can do year-round production, because you can totally do it fully indoors with just like a little bit of artificial light and just kind of tricking them into thinking it's fall time, so nice and humid, cool temps, and a little bit of light. So it just was a really kind of it seemed like it was a well-suited crop for local production here.
Yeah. We've talked before, my business is microgreens, and it also is considered a CEA product, so controlled environment agriculture, kind of like aquaponics, hydroponics, mushroom growing, of course, sprouts, microgreens. We're all in that same boat. Yeah. And it is nice to be able to produce year-round consistently. So what is your guys' season currently that you guys are producing in greenhouses?
We're actually shutting down the grow room today. Just had our last farmers market at Bell's Nursery this last Saturday, and we've been kind of just limping along for the last month and a half with the cold temps, just kind of heating with space heaters, because currently our setup is just not set up for year-round production. So the season for us kind of kicks off in March. We'll start producing blocks, and then kind of mid-March is when we'll actually start fruiting out our first crops of mushrooms. And then we'll go kind of throughout the summer. So definitely, like most kind of things in Alaska, June, July, August are big kind of months. And then we kind of start slowly winding down to end in December, at least at this point. But hopefully our plan is that this is going to be our last winter shutdown. So our goal starting in kind of 2027, I guess, would be to be year-round and not shut down in December of 2026. So fingers crossed that goes well.
Okay, cool. So mushroom growing, a lot of folks know nothing about it. Is it like growing plants, or are you planting like mushroom seeds in the soil and then you water them and they grow? Or what is the process and the life cycle for producing mushrooms? So what is it? What is days 1 to day 30 or whatever your process is?
Yeah. So it kind of all starts where we start with clones. So you could technically start with spores. You could take a mushroom, you could put it on a piece of paper, let it sit overnight, and it would drop, thousands, if not millions of spores onto that piece of paper. The only issue there is that each one of those spores is going to produce, kind of its own unique personality. So we start from clones. That way we know exactly kind of that one has produced great mushrooms for us in the past. And so then we'll start that on Petri dishes. And then we switch over the Petri dishes. We have a kind of a clean room. It's kind of where most of our production happens. So it's a very sterile room with HEPA filters and what's called a laminar flow hood, where it blows clean air over a workspace, so we can open up all these containers with the mushroom. And because ultimately the big kind of threat to mushroom growing is either other fungi or bacteria. So we want to keep things as clean as possible throughout the grow process. But the kind of the basic steps are we do Petri dishes, then we cut that up into like 20 little chunks, and then we'll put that into a bag of grain. So we use Alaskan-grown whole oats, and then we sterilize that grain, kill the plant, and then we use that seed essentially as a seed for the mushroom. So we grow the fungus out on that grain, and then we can use, once the fungus has kind of coated the entire outside of each of the grains, then we can break that up again and then add that into sawdust. So we sterilize sawdust using essentially like a canning procedure. So heat and steam, we rehydrate the sawdust, they go in these specialized bags, and then after they've cooled down, we open them up in the lab, we add the fungus into it, we seal the bag back up. It has a little HEPA filter patch so that it can breathe. Since mushrooms, they're more closely related to animals than they are to plants. They need that fresh air. You don't want to suffocate them in there. So they can breathe through that filter patch. And then, after, depending on the species, anywhere from 10 days to 3 months, they'll kind of take to digest all of that sawdust. And then once the mushroom, the what's called mycelium, which is actually what the actual organism itself, has kind of decomposed all of that and has knit all that loose sawdust into like a nice solid block that's all white with the mushroom mycelium. At that point, we can put it into what we call the fruiting phase, where we actually produce the mushrooms. So that's where we actually cut the bag open, we put it into a humid greenhouse with the right environmental conditions, and within 2 to 4 weeks, you'll get a nice crop of mushrooms off of there.
Okay, so it sounds like you have where you're inoculating the substrate and then you have to
Yep,
incubate it for a little while, let it grow, and
exactly.
then you're putting into a fruiting chamber. Those are like the three
Yes,
steps, it sounds like.
those are the 3 steps. Yep, exactly. You nailed it.
Okay, and so what is the timeline from, let's say, oyster mushroom? Everyone knows what an oyster mushroom is. It's
Yeah.
pretty common.
Yep.
What is it from
Yep.
petri dish to product? What is that timeline?
So it's about a week per petri dish. We do 2 petri dish stages. So 2 weeks on petri dishes, then it goes on to grain. We do 2 grain steps, each of which is 2 weeks. So that's another month. So that's 6 weeks total. Then it goes on to sawdust, which is another 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So that puts us at about 2 months right there. And then the fruiting itself is about a 2-week process.
Okay.
So you're looking at about 2.5 months, 3 months if you try and do a second harvest off of a block.
Got it.
And that's going to be the fastest one. The shiitake takes significantly longer. Whereas the oyster mushroom in incubation phase is 2 weeks. On a shiitake, it's 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 12 weeks on a shiitake. So they just take a lot longer during that incubation phase. That's kind of a typical, I'd say, oyster mushroom, lion's mane are all in that kind of 2 to 3 month mark. And for the fast growing stuff, that's kind of what you can expect. So definitely not as much as, a lot of the outdoor agriculture, but definitely not as fast as you microgreen guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So you threw out lion's mane. We're talking about shiitake, talking about oysters. Yep. How many different varieties of mushrooms are you growing? Now, as I understand it, you guys are growing the primary decomposers, not the secondary decomposers, which would be the agaricus, the button mushrooms.
Right.
The primary decomposers, they're called the teeth of the forest, right? When a tree falls down, they're the first ones to break it down.
You nailed it. Yeah.
But
exactly.
what are all the different varieties of mushrooms that you guys are growing, and what do they look like? What do they taste like? Give us your whole product.
Yeah. So the shiitake, I'll start with those. Those are kind of the classic. Probably most folks have had those. Really, really rich, really earthy, lots of umami flavor profiles, very classic mushroom flavor. So yeah, we grow one type of shiitake. Then we have, depending on how you want to count it, we've got 4 to 5 different oyster mushroom species. Those are definitely they have a very meaty texture, but they're on the milder, sweeter end of the kind of flavor spectrum. And they're just these beautiful bouquets. So we grow one variety. The kind of main one that we grow is from the Pacific Northwest. It's called the blue oyster, and it has this kind of dark gray, almost bluish hue to it on top of the cap. And then underside is very, it's this kind of cream color white. But they're really, really nice, very fresh, very mild. Lots of folks who who aren't really huge mushroom fans, I think that's a great way for people to kind of get into mushrooms because they're just not as earthy as a lot of the other ones. But those, so we grow 5 different types of those. We have the blue one, that's kind of our main one because that one grows in the Pacific Northwest. But we also, in peak summer season when it's hot, we grow this tropical variety from Florida that's bright pink. So they look very different from one another. We also have a bright yellow one from Eastern Europe that's, literally bright yellow. So very, very striking. And those oyster mushrooms, they look somewhat different from another. We also grow a white one. But overall, the flavor profiles are pretty similar on those. There's some subtle distinctions. But for the most part, the oyster mushroom is kind of a mild, sweet mushroom.
Yeah. And you have a king one as well.
Yeah, the king oyster, which is kind of flavor-wise very similar to the blue oyster, but it has a much thicker stem and a small cap, whereas the blue oyster and most of the other oyster mushrooms tend to be almost exclusively capped. They have a very, very small, little thin stem. But the king oyster is really well known for having this very meaty, thick stem on it. And so a lot of people like to use that kind of as a scallop. It's just this very uniform, great texture on it, very meaty. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, I'd say the big outlier for the oyster mushrooms. We also grow some other kind of specialty ones. We grow piopino, which is an Italian mushroom from northern Italy that's traditionally used in risotto. That one looks like what mycologists would jokingly term an LBM mushroom, a little brown mushroom, because it has this just dark brown cap, gills underneath. It is a very unassuming mushroom. You could walk out in the forest and find probably half a dozen mushrooms that look very similar to the piopino that I don't even know if I could identify a wild piopino versus something else. So they're very, very kind of a standard look for a mushroom, but they have this really nice nutty flavor profile. So the Italians in the fall, before the Asian kind of technology of cultivating on sawdust came over, the the Pia Pino was like a seasonal delicacy in northern Italy, where every fall they would wild harvest it. So that one's really, really nice. We also grow a mushroom that flavor-wise is very similar called the chestnut mushroom, and that one was used in Japanese cuisine. So that one's really, really nice. Very similar flavor profile, very nutty, very earthy, and that one was used in a lot of like Japanese soups and sauces and kind of vegetable stock, ramen noodles, bases for miso soup, that kind of thing. So that one's really nice. Then we also grow the enoki, which some folks might have heard of that one or seen that one. It's very, very delicate looking. It has this very long, thin stem and just a tiny little cap. And they grow in these clusters. So you see them at Asian grocery stores a lot. They're traditionally used in like Chinese hot pot. They're a very popular soup mushroom from Asia. And they're also very mild and almost fruity tasting. They're very different flavor profile on them than you would typically find with kind of what people think about as mushroom flavor. So those ones are really nice. And then the lion's mane, that one's definitely worth mentioning here because that one doesn't have any of the earthy flavor profiles that mushrooms are really known for. So that one has this, it doesn't even look like a mushroom at all. It's white and it kind of looks like almost like a coral or something. It has these long kind of hairs on it, but it just grows. It's just like a pom-pom is what it looks like. And if you tear that one open, it's very, very dense tissue. It's a very dense mushroom. And flavor-wise, it's rich but mild. So it tastes almost like crab. If you cook it like a normal mushroom with just kind of like butter, garlic, salt, pepper, it almost tastes like crab. But it's also a very, very popular meat substitute mushroom where folks will use that. You can marinate it and treat it like a steak, or you can do crab cakes out of it. Or we had some friends visiting from Mexico, and they did like a mushroom mole that they would have traditionally used like shredded chicken, and that was awesome. So that one's a really, really popular kind of in the vegetarian, vegan crowd as a meat substitute, or for folks who have like a shellfish allergy who want to, still partake of some, king crab-like dishes that they can't maybe use crab for.
And then I know you guys also dabble in some medicinal mushrooms as well.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of mushrooms, particularly from Asia, that have been used in a lot of traditional Chinese medicine and stuff. So reishi's a popular one there, which is not unlike the birch polypore that grows wild up here on birch trees that you can see like even this time of year because the fruiting body takes multiple years to form. But that one they would traditionally make a tea out of that in China, and it has some really, really positive effects on the immune system. It upregulates the production of white blood cells, kind of known as like an anti-cancer mushroom. And in that same vein, we also grow turkey tail, which is another kind of anti-cancer mushroom from Asia. So those are kind of both ones that they're very tough. I'd say chaga is probably the most famous medicinal mushroom up here, which unfortunately we cannot grow because you'd have to grow a birch tree and then kill it with the fungus because it's actually parasitic. So it kind of parasitizes all that energy. It leaches energy from the tree as it rots out the core of the tree. So we just do a little bit of wild harvesting on that one, but that's probably the most famous medicinal here in Alaska that a lot of folks are familiar with because you can hunt them this time of year is prime chaga harvesting season. So we do get out a little bit in the winter to harvest chaga as well. But that's kind of like one of the other big medicinals. And I think the only other, like lion's mane is also a medicinal, so we'll grow a bunch of that as well for medicinal products in particular, as well as the culinary side. And then the cordyceps. The cordyceps is another big one, especially in the winter here. It's really nice because it's a peripheral vasodilator. So opens up the blood vessels, increases blood flow. So a lot of folks really find it super helpful with things like Raynaud's, which is the cold hands and feet, because it just increases blood flow to those areas where a lot of folks, especially with Raynaud's, you get this constricting of the blood vessels in your extremities, which gets very uncomfortable, especially when it's, -5 degrees out. So that one's a really cool one, but it's also good for muscle recovery. It's kind of become a big athletic supplement for folks who are really active. So that's another, So it's been fun, kind of, playing around with the different medicinals. We do a few different products with them. We do like an alcohol extraction, like a tincture. So those are very concentrated. I wouldn't say they taste great. It's just very concentrated, just water, alcohol, mushroom. That's it. But then we also do some drink mixes that are very similar to, I don't know if you all have seen like online advertised like Rise or Mud Water or any of the mushroom coffees, like those types of things. They're kind of like a nice drink mix. So we do like a mushroom chai, a mushroom cocoa, and a mushroom matcha mix that have like a blend of all those medicinals that we talked about.
Wow. That's quite a few value-added products.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
So if you wouldn't mind finishing off our show with telling us how people can buy these products from you, if you sell them direct or just farmers markets, or if you have retail partners, and then also how people can follow you guys online and track you down at what market going to be.
Yeah. So we sell all the dried kind of value-added products are available on our website, which is farnorthfungi.com, and we ship kind of year-round. We've kind of built up our stock over the summer to be able to ride out the next few months when we're not actually producing mushrooms. So you can always order through the website. We also keep, if you're in the valley listening, you can stop by Bush's Bunches, but we also keep the value-added product stock all year round. So that's been super awesome to have an outlet in the valley where we can folks don't have to necessarily meet us at the farmer's market. In Anchorage, we're still figuring out a spot where we're going to have kind of in-person sales. We do sell to Blue Market, and we just dropped off our last order last night to them. And then next season, we were just talking to Johnny's Produce. We're going to be in at Johnny's next season as well for kind of a little local grocery store. And then, farmers market wise, we're at not most of the farmers markets. We're at a bunch of the farmers markets around. In the valley, we're at the Matanuska Community Farmers Market, which is every Wednesday, 4 to 7 after work down by the railroad there. And then in Anchorage, we do both Saturday markets. We do the South Anchorage one on O'Malley. And prior to that, we're in Bell's Nursery kind of up until May when the markets go outdoors. And we also do the Midtown one in the old BP building parking lot. And those are both Saturday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., kind of throughout the summer season there.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about mushrooms. It's super fascinating. I always love seeing you at the market and talking about business, and it's a lot of fun. It's great having you here. I'm so excited to see your mushrooms in the grocery stores someday with this new facility. I'm sure you guys are going to just take over.
Oh, yeah. That's the plan. We're trying to get into all the places that, everybody shops. So trying to get into Fred Meyer and stuff and just make it easy for folks to add in some fresh produce. So, we'll be definitely giving you a ring here in a few months to help us get all of our certifications, because I know you went through that process in the last few years. So we will be picking your brain. Yeah, so appreciate you having me on, Ken. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gabe. And thank you, everybody, for listening to Ag Matters. I'm your host, Ken. I'll talk to you guys later.
You've been listening to Ag Matters, covering positive agriculture stories from across Alaska. Ag Matters is a production of Radio Free Palmer, recorded at our studios in Palmer, Alaska. For more information about this program, email manager@radiofreepalmer.org.